Here's a strange fact to sit with. There's an extinct species of human that we've never found a full skeleton of. Our entire physical record of them for over a decade was a single pinky bone, a couple of teeth, and part of a jaw. And yet that same species figured out how to live and breathe comfortably at altitudes that give trained modern athletes altitude sickness. Tens of thousands of years before anyone invented an oxygen tank, most people have never even heard their name. So let's talk about the Denisovans and the 6 things almost everyone gets wrong about them. Myth number 1. We basically know nothing about them, it's true. The fossil record is embarrassingly thin. A finger bone found in a Siberian cave in 2008. A few molars. A jaw fragment. For a while, Denisovan was less a species and more a rumor with a DNA sequence attached. But in 2018, researchers sequencing a bone fragment from that same cave found something nobody expected. It belonged to a teenage girl whose mother was Neanderthal and whose father was Denisovan. A first-generation hybrid. 2 separate lineages of ancient humans meeting and having a child in a cave in the Altai Mountains over 50,000 years ago. Researchers nicknamed her Deni. Statistically, finding a first-generation hybrid like this is close to a needle in a haystack event. It means the researchers got lucky enough to sample the exact right bone fragment from a cave that had been occupied on and off for tens of thousands of years. From a handful of bone scraps, we didn't just learn Denisovans existed. We learned they were mixing with other human species and doing it often enough that finding evidence wasn't a 1 in a billion fluke. Myth number 2. Nobody knows what they looked like this was true until very recently. And the way it got solved is genuinely wild. In 2019, scientists tried something that had never been done before. Instead of waiting for a skull, they used chemical markers on Denisovan DNA to predict what their skeleton and face probably look like. A wide face, a sloping forehead, a heavy jaw, almost no chin. It was an educated genetic prediction with no fossil to compare it against. Then, in 2025, that prediction was finally tested. A remarkably complete skull known as the Harbin cranium, discovered in China back in 1933 and hidden for decades before resurfacing in 2018, was analyzed using proteins and DNA extracted from its teeth. It matched. The skull, sometimes called Dragon Man, is now widely accepted as Denisovan, or at least Denisovan related. For the first time, this ghost species that we only knew from tiny bone fragments finally had a face, and it matched the prediction almost perfectly. Now that you know what they look like, here's where things get even more interesting. Because what they could actually do makes the idea of the primitive caveman look ridiculous. Myth number 3. They were just a Siberian species because the first Denisovan fossils came from a cave in Siberia. Many people assume that's where their story begins and ends. It doesn't. A jawbone found on the Tibetan Plateau in a cave more than 3,000 meters above sea level turned out to belong to a Denisovan and dates back roughly 160,000 years. That means they were living at extreme altitude long before modern humans figured out how. A Denisovan linked tooth was discovered in Laos. A jawbone recovered from the seabed off Taiwan after sitting in a museum for years was also identified as Denisovan. And then there's the Harbin skull from northeast China. Together, these discoveries show one species surviving everywhere from freezing steppe to high mountain plateaus to warm, humid coastlines. That's not a small population hiding in one cave. That's an entire continent. Myth number 4. They were just brutish and unremarkable. Here's the fact that should really blow your mind. Around 3 to 4% of the average Tibetan's genome carries a Denisovan gene called EPAS1. It controls how the body responds to low oxygen. Most people who move to high altitude produce more red blood cells. That sounds helpful until it thickens the blood and creates serious health problems over time. The Denisovan version works differently. It allows the body to use available oxygen more efficiently without dangerously thickening the blood. More than 80% of Tibetans carry this gene today. An extinct species handed modern humans a working solution for surviving extreme altitude. And we've been benefiting from it for tens of thousands of years. That isn't the legacy of a primitive species. And it wasn't just biology. In the same Siberian cave, archaeologists discovered a polished chlorite bracelet made from stone that doesn't naturally occur nearby. Someone transported the raw material from somewhere else. The bracelet even has a carefully drilled hole through it. Researchers believe it was made using a rotary drilling technique that spun a tool fast enough to cut through stone without cracking it. The same archaeological layers also contain finely crafted bone needles, the kind you'd use to sew fitted clothing instead of simply wrapping yourself in animal hides. None of that sounds primitive. It sounds like skilled craftsmanship. Myth number 5. They left almost no legacy. This may be the biggest misconception of all. Because in a very real sense, they never completely disappeared. People in Papua New Guinea, parts of Australia, and the Philippines still carry between 3 and 5% Denisovan DNA. For a species with almost no surviving skeletons, they left an incredible amount behind, just not in museums. Myth number 6. Modern humans simply replaced them. We still don't know exactly why the Denisovans disappeared. And anyone claiming they do is oversimplifying the story. The leading explanation is similar to what probably happened to the Neanderthals. Small populations were squeezed by climate change. They faced competition and new diseases brought by modern humans. And, as Denny proves, there was enough interbreeding that many surviving Denisovan groups may simply have merged into other human populations rather than disappearing all at once. Somewhere near the end of their history, there was probably an ordinary Denisovan family living everyday life with no idea they represented the final chapter of a story that had lasted around 400,000 years. We simply don't know who they were, or when that final chapter closed, and that's really the bigger point. For most of human history, our species wasn't alone. Neanderthals, Denisovans, the small-bodied Homo floresiensis in Indonesia, Homo luzonensis in the Philippines, late populations of Homo erectus still surviving in Asia, multiple human species shared the same planet, sometimes even the same valleys, at the same time. Some researchers now argue that Denisovans should officially be classified as Homo longi, based on the Harbin skull. That idea is still being debated and not everyone agrees. But one thing isn't up for debate. A species we've barely ever seen engineered a genetic solution for surviving one of the harshest environments on Earth. It spread across an entire continent. Then, quietly wrote itself into the DNA of millions of living people. So the next time someone says extinct humans were just primitive brutes who lost the fight for survival, tell them about the Denisovans. If a species we've never even found a complete skeleton of can still surprise scientists this much. Imagine what else is waiting inside some undiscovered cave to rewrite everything we think we know. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and leave a comment telling me which extinct human species you'd like to see next. Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbits of Indonesia, or Homo naledi, the mysterious species that may have been burying its dead hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans. If you learned something new today, leave a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.